My name is Marcie Holloway. I'm 26 years old. And this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the people you love most will betray you the deepest, and how I took my power back, piece by piece. It should have been the proudest day of my life. 6 years of grinding, sacrificing, fighting tooth and nail to reach a goal no one in my family thought I could achieve. I was graduating from the University of California with a bachelor's in business administration. Every seat in that massive auditorium was filled with beaming parents, siblings, and grandparents holding balloons and flowers. But in the fifth row, right where there should have been 3 warm, familiar faces, there were only empty chairs. A small sign taped to the seats read, "Family of Marcie Holloway." It was like the universe wanted to make the humiliation impossible to ignore. The cheers of the crowd rose around me as names were called, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. But I couldn't hear any of it. My heart was pounding too hard. My phone buzzed in my gown pocket. I didn't need to look. I already knew what it said. Still, I checked it. A text from Mom. "Sorry, sweetie. I know how much this meant to you, but Uncle Lou's Super Bowl party is a once-a-year thing. We'll celebrate next weekend. Love you." The words were warm, almost apologetic. But they felt like knives. Cold. Familiar. I stared at those 3 seats, refusing to cry. Not here. Not in front of all the people whose families showed up. Mine hadn't. Not for this. Not for me. I walked up when they called my name, Marcie Elena Holloway, and the crowd clapped because that's what they were supposed to do. I smiled because that's what I was supposed to do. But inside, something shifted. Something cracked open and bled. My diploma, thick and glossy in its stiff leather folder, felt less like a reward and more like evidence. Proof of every lonely night, every skipped meal, every time I chose studying over sleep, over fun, over asking for help. After the ceremony, I sat alone outside the auditorium on a stone bench, letting the ocean breeze sting my cheeks. I told myself it was just windburn. That I wasn't crying. That I didn't care. But I did. Because this wasn't the first time they'd forgotten me. 3 years ago, they missed my community college graduation too. Back then it was a broken-down car. I believed them until Uncle Lou posted pictures of the whole family at a lakeside barbecue that same day. My mom in her Queen of the Grill apron. My dad waving a beer. My brother, Derek, shirtless and laughing by the fire pit. I stared at those photos for hours that night, curled up in my dorm bed. No one had called to say congratulations. No one had noticed I was missing. That night, I told myself I'd prove them wrong. That I'd do something so incredible, so undeniable, they'd have no choice but to be proud of me. And yet, here I was, graduated and still invisible. The text from my dad came next, like clockwork. "There'll be a next time, Marcie. Maybe your master's, huh? We'll make that one count. Promise." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. A promise? Like the one they made last time? Like every time Derek accidentally used my credit card and they promised to fix it, but didn't? Like the time I co-signed a loan to help with the house and ended up $12,000 in debt while they remodeled the bathroom? My phone buzzed again. Derek this time. "Yo sis. Can you spot me 2K? Uncle Lou's selling his season tickets. It's a once-in-a-lifetime deal. Think of it as a gift for your grad." Gift? I nearly laughed. The audacity was almost impressive. They hadn't come to my graduation. They hadn't paid for a dime of my education. But they remembered me when they needed something. Always when they needed something. And every time, I had said yes. Because that's what daughters do. That's what sisters do. That's what I told myself. But that day, sitting on a cold bench, holding a degree no one had shown up to see, I realized something. Saying yes had never brought me closer to them. It had only ever made me smaller. I took the long way home to my 1-bedroom apartment in Chula Vista. The kind with peeling paint and neighbors who argued through thin walls. I had paid every month on my own, waiting tables, cleaning night offices, working every holiday shift while my classmates went home to their families. As soon as I stepped inside, my phone buzzed again. It was like they could sense I had a moment of peace and couldn't allow it. Mom again. Hey honey, proud of you. By the way, roof's leaking again. Just $2,500 this time. Can you help? Dad's getting an insurance payout this summer. We'll pay you back, promise. I stared at that text for a long time. I thought of the last payout, the one that turned into a new flat-screen TV Derek posted on Instagram. Then I opened my banking app. $1,500 gone from my savings. A transfer to a joint emergency fund I'd created years ago to help Mom. I had forgotten she still had access. Then I checked my credit report. 3 new credit cards opened under my name in the past month. All registered to my parents' old address. That's when I stopped shaking. That's when the cold fury set in. They hadn't just forgotten my graduation. They had stolen from me the liquor store purchases, the new furniture, even the ridiculous $325 bill from Electronics Hub. None of it was mine, but it was in my name. That was the moment the shame cracked and the rage slipped through. This wasn't help. This was theft. This was betrayal. This was exploitation disguised as family. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let it slide. I opened my contacts and scrolled to a name I hadn't dared call before, Amelia Blake. Financial protection attorney. I had saved her number 2 years ago after a friend told me she helped abuse survivors rebuild from financial ruin. I never thought I'd need it, but now I hit dial. 3 rings. Then a calm, assertive voice answered. Miss Holloway, I take it you're ready now. I am, I said. And I'm done being used. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table, if you could even call it that, just a slab of particle board with wobbling legs, surrounded by paperwork, old bills, screenshots, and call logs. For once, I wasn't crying or begging anyone to listen. I was building a case. Amelia had been calm, professional, but underneath it all, she sounded furious on my behalf. Not the performative kind of outrage, but the quiet, focused rage of someone who's seen too many people crushed by the people who were supposed to protect them. She told me to gather everything, credit card statements, bank transfers, text messages, even photos if I had them. I had them all. Years worth. I didn't realize how much I had documented until I looked. Every lie, every stolen dollar, every "we'll pay you back" that never happened. I had saved it. Maybe because some part of me always knew that one day I'd need to prove that I wasn't crazy. That I wasn't imagining it. By sunrise, I had a folder 2 inches thick and a thumb drive with every digital file backed up twice. Amelia called again at 8:03 a.m. sharp. I've looked through the initial documents. Marcie, this isn't just borrowing. This is premeditated identity fraud. Her words felt like confirmation of something I had refused to let myself believe. She wasn't shocked. And that terrified me more than anything. You're not the first, she added gently. And you won't be the last. But you will be one of the few who stands up and says no more. I'll help you get your life back. But we have to move fast. By noon, we'd frozen all credit accounts under my name. Filed disputes with the 3 major credit bureaus. Sent cease and desist letters to every lender and utility company linked to my family's address. That same afternoon, I received a barrage of missed calls. 12 from Mom, 7 from Dad, 9 from Derek, including one voicemail that started with a slurred, "Yo, Marcie, what the hell are you doing?" I didn't listen to the rest. Instead, I packed a suitcase. Just the essentials, my laptop, the degree they never saw me earn, some clothes, and that folder of evidence. I booked a one-way ticket to Sedona, Arizona, a place I'd dreamed about during countless shifts, wiping down diner counters and folding laundry in student housing. A place no one in my family knew I loved. I didn't need Manhattan or Miami. I just needed peace. Somewhere the phone couldn't find me. Before I left, Amelia sent over the full legal strategy. It wasn't just about freezing accounts. We were pressing charges, identity theft, financial exploitation, fraud. And the most brutal part for my family, Amelia's firm had connections to a district attorney who'd been pushing for more visibility into domestic financial abuse cases. "This isn't small claims court," Amelia said. "This is going to be real." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. I arrived in Sedona, renting a small cabin tucked into the Red Rocks, owned by a retired schoolteacher named Carol who offered me a mug of cinnamon tea the second I stepped in. "You look like someone who finally told the world no," she said with a kind smile. I nearly broke down right then. For the first time in my life, I wasn't someone's backup plan. I wasn't the family doormat. I was a person rebuilding from scratch, with witnesses, lawyers, and proof. The next morning, I received a transfer from Amelia's paralegal. My parents had already tried to open another credit line under my name. This time, they were flagged immediately. The alert had triggered a fraud investigation, automatically. They were still trying, still acting like I was theirs to use. But now, someone was watching. I sat on the cabin porch that evening, overlooking the red cliffs of Sedona, the light painting the rocks gold. I didn't hear shouting, didn't hear demands, just wind, just peace. And then, something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed, not with a demand, but with a message from Megan. Megan was the closest thing I ever had to a sister. We worked together for years at the college cafe. She knew about the skipped birthdays, the emergency loans, the family guilt trips. She'd seen me cry in the break room while I tried to figure out how to say no to another urgent favor. Her message was simple. "I saw what you posted. My hands are shaking just reading it. But damn, Marcie, I'm so proud of you." It hit me harder than I expected. I didn't post much. But before leaving California, I had written something raw on a small online financial forum for women. I didn't mention names, just the truth. About being used. About stolen credit. About missing your own graduation celebration because your family prioritized nachos and a football game. And now, I was being seen. That post started to get traction. Dozens of replies. Then hundreds. Same story. Different names. "This is me. I thought I was alone. Thank you for saying what I never could." I wasn't alone. I had just spent years thinking I was. A few days later, Amelia called again. "We've completed the case filing. We're officially pressing charges. It's going to get messy. Are you ready?" I looked around the little cabin. At the tea mug in my hand. At the stillness of the trees outside. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. "I've never been more ready," I told her. What happened next was something I never could have predicted. The post I made went viral. A woman named Rebecca Tran, a financial counselor from Portland, reached out to me directly. She told me she'd worked with survivors of financial abuse before, but something about my story cut deeper. Maybe because it wasn't about strangers. It was about family. The one thing no one wants to talk about. "I want to help you get back on your feet," she said. "Not just legally, but professionally. You're smart. You survived. That makes you qualified to help others." We started talking more. She introduced me to people, organizations, advocacy groups. Suddenly, people wanted to hear what I had to say, not because I had suffered, but because I had fought back. And then came the email that changed everything. Subject line: job opportunity, Avalon Consulting, Portland. They had read my post. They had read the comments. They had read every word. And they offered me an interview. Not as a victim, but as a leader. The morning of my interview with Avalon Consulting, I stood in front of the mirror in the small Sedona cabin, smoothing down the navy blue blouse I'd bought from a thrift store 3 years earlier. It was the same blouse I wore to my part-time shifts at the university library, a piece of clothing that had once made me feel invisible. But today it made me feel grounded. My laptop sat open on the small wooden table, camera tilted to catch just enough of the rustic charm of my temporary refuge. I wasn't trying to impress with backgrounds or filters. I didn't need to. I had something more powerful than polish. I had my story. The Zoom meeting clicked on. A woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes and a warm smile appeared on screen. Her name was Celeste Morgan, HR director of Avalon, and someone I had admired from afar during my undergrad years. "Marcie," she said, with a tone that held neither pity nor condescension. "It's an honor to meet you. We've all read your story, and we don't want to talk about your trauma. We want to talk about your strength." I almost forgot how to speak. For the first time in my life, I was in a room, albeit a virtual one, where I wasn't asked to justify my worth. I was simply asked to exist, truthfully. Celeste asked about my experience, not just in school, but in surviving. Balancing 3 jobs, managing budgets with pennies, finding my way through the legal labyrinth of credit recovery. I told her about the nights I spent cataloging fraudulent charges, the spreadsheets I built to track every unauthorized withdrawal, the emotional toll of pretending I wasn't devastated. "You've done the work of a financial advisor without the title," she said. "We want to give you that title and the platform that comes with it." 2 days later, the offer letter arrived. Community Program Manager for Avalon's Financial Protection Division. Starting salary, $95,000. Full benefits. 6 months relocation assistance. Paid travel to advocacy seminars. A team that believed in me. A boss who saw my value. A future that I didn't have to apologize for. I stared at the email until tears blurred the words. Then I signed it. And just like that, the girl who once cried alone on a stone bench outside her graduation ceremony because no one came to celebrate was now packing for Portland, Oregon. I moved into a small apartment in the Pearl District. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. No co-signed leases. No borrowed couches. Just a key I held in my own hand. On my first day at Avalon, the receptionist greeted me with a smile and said, "We're so glad you're here." I nearly cried again. Not long after I started, Celeste called me into her office. "We're organizing a seminar," she said, "on financial independence for women under 30. It's a huge event, over 500 attendees. I want you to be our keynote speaker." My stomach dropped. "Me?" She smiled. "You don't need credentials when you have truth. And you, Marcie, have both." I agreed. But fate doesn't let you rise without testing you. The day of the conference came quickly. I wore a clean, fitted navy suit. Not expensive. Not designer. But mine. As I stood backstage, clutching my note cards, a commotion erupted near the lobby. Celeste rushed in, her face pale. "Marcie, we have a situation." 3 people had forced their way into the event, shouting my name. I didn't need to ask. Mom, Dad, Derek. Security was trying to remove them, but they were causing a scene. I could hear their voices echoing in the auditorium. "This is our daughter. She's making up lies. She's trying to ruin our family. She owes us for everything we gave her." And then Derek, phone held high, live streaming it all. "This is what betrayal looks like, people." My sister turned sellout. I stood frozen. The rage bubbled in my chest like lava. The same old narrative. I was the villain. The ungrateful daughter. The traitor. But this time I had something I'd never had before. A stage. A spotlight. And the truth. As the MC announced my name, I stepped out. The spotlight hit me like a tidal wave, but behind it I saw them. My family, red-faced, screaming, trying to shout over the microphone. And, for the first time, I didn't flinch. "If you want the audience to know the truth," I said, my voice steady, "then let's lay everything out." I turned toward the projector screen behind me and clicked the remote. Slide 1. Screenshots of unauthorized credit card applications filed in my name. Slide 2. Bank transactions draining my account. Slide 3. Texts from Derek asking for money, followed by his Vegas vacation photos. Then the kicker, Slide 4. A voicemail from Mom, saying, "Marcie, you know family always takes care of each other. You make the money, we keep the family afloat. Don't be selfish." Silence gripped the room. I looked back at the crowd. I was silent for years, thinking it would protect the people I loved. But silence only protects the abuser. The applause started slowly. A few scattered claps. Then a tidal wave of support. Security moved in. "You are trespassing and disrupting the event," one guard said firmly. "Please leave now." And then, as if the universe was scripting the moment itself, two police officers emerged from backstage. Robert Holloway. Derek Holloway. Patricia Holloway. "You are under arrest for financial fraud, identity theft, and credit abuse." The clicking of handcuffs was louder than the entire audience's reaction. I stood still. I didn't cry. I didn't look away. I simply exhaled. It was over. That day, my speech wasn't just a keynote, it was a reckoning. It was a public release of everything I had been forced to carry alone for years. And the response was overwhelming. Not in pity, but in solidarity. Emails flooded my inbox. Messages from people who had experienced the same betrayal. One of them came from Highland Press. A senior editor named Elaine Foster wrote, "Marcie, your story is exactly what the world needs to hear. If you're ready, we'd like to publish it." I stared at the email from Highland Press for a long time. A part of me, maybe the part that had scrubbed floors at 3 a.m. to make rent, still didn't believe it was real. But it was. Elaine Foster, senior editor of one of the most respected independent publishing houses in the country, wanted to turn my story into a book. Not because I was famous. Not because I had 1 million followers. But because I had endured something that too many others had suffered in silence and dared to speak out loud. "If you're ready," Elaine had written, "we'd like to help you tell it." I didn't hesitate. I said yes. 3 months later, I stood in a different room, this time not defending myself, but launching something I had once dreamed of when I felt most abandoned. A scholarship for young people who, like me, had been exploited by their own families. We called it the Phoenix Scholarship. Because we weren't just survivors. We were rebuilders. The launch ceremony was intimate, nothing flashy. Just a room full of real people. Celeste sat beside Rebecca Tran, the advisor who had helped me reclaim my finances, and Megan, my oldest friend, waved at me from the back with a proud grin. They weren't blood relatives, but they were my family. And in that room, I saw the faces of others like me. People who had been used, guilt, manipulated by those who claimed to love them. Now, they were students, advocates, professionals, all rebuilding. I stood at the podium, microphone in hand, and said, "Family should never come at the cost of your identity, your future, or your peace. We don't just offer scholarships. We offer the right to choose yourself." When the event ended, the most unexpected thing happened. A young woman, barely 20, wearing a faded backpack and trembling, walked up to me and said, "My name's Sophie. I saw your talk. Your story made me realize I'm not alone." They opened credit cards under my name too. I was going to ignore it, but today I won't. I took her hand and held it tight, because I knew that version of her. I used to be her. Helping Sophie wasn't a one-time act of kindness. It was a mirror of everything I had once needed. And now it was my turn to give it. That night, I returned to my Portland apartment and sat at my desk, looking at 2 photographs on my wall. The first was from my undergraduate graduation, me in a rented black gown, standing alone, with 3 empty chairs behind me. The second was from just a few weeks ago, me in a deep blue MBA robe, surrounded by Megan holding a flag that read, "You did it," Rebecca giving a thumbs up, and Celeste with a bouquet so big it almost covered her face. 2 graduations. 2 worlds. One forgotten. One chosen. I gently touched the photo frame, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. Because in losing the family I was born into, I found the people who truly saw me. And they didn't need DNA to do it. My phone lit up. A message from Naomi, one of our first Phoenix Scholarship recipients. "Hi, Marcie. I just got the scholarship letter. Can I ask for your advice? How do I start choosing myself?" I smiled, blinking fast. Naomi's message took me right back to the girl I had been in that one-bedroom apartment in Chula Vista, cold, scared, desperate to be enough for people who never intended to see her. Now, I was the person she turned to. My journey had become someone else's map. That weekend, I held our first Phoenix workshop, an intimate gathering for survivors of family financial abuse. Not a big conference. No cameras. Just a circle of trust. One of the speakers was a young woman named Emily. Her eyes were tired, but her voice was steel. I used to think I was a bad daughter for saying no to my mother. But now I realize sometimes protecting yourself is the most sacred form of love. No applause was needed, but it came anyway. Quiet. Fierce. Honest. After the workshop ended, as the others filtered out, Rebecca walked up to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. That little Marcie from before, she's come a long way. I looked at her and smiled softly. She's still here, I said. But she's not afraid to say no anymore. That night, back in my apartment, the sun bathed my window in soft gold. On my desk was a contract from Highland Press. My first book, Stepping Out of the Family Shadow, had already gone into a second print. A third was in the works. Beside it sat the manuscript of my next book, a guide for anyone struggling to tell the difference between love and control. I didn't write it as an expert. I wrote it as someone who had survived. My phone rang. It was Celeste. "We just got confirmation," she said. "You've been invited to speak at TEDx Portland." I froze. Me? Celeste chuckled, like she could read my thoughts through the line. "Don't doubt it. Your story's changing lives. People are listening." I sat there in silence, then nodded. "Then I'm ready to speak." Because now I wasn't just a survivor of family betrayal. I was a voice for those still too afraid to speak. The day of the TEDx Portland talk arrived with the quiet intensity of a storm held just beneath the skin. I stood in the dressing room of the Escadia Financial Center, hands trembling slightly as I fastened the lapel mic to my blazer. It was a simple outfit, a navy suit, no flashy accessories. Just me, honest, unfiltered. I didn't dress for power. I dressed for truth. Celeste walked in, giving me a reassuring nod. "You good?" I smiled. "Never better." And I meant it. For once, I wasn't walking into a room to beg for understanding. I wasn't about to defend myself. I was here to speak, to finally, fully own what had been taken from me. My narrative. My name. My voice. Miss Marcie Holloway, the MC's voice boomed from the stage. A survivor, an advocate, and now a leader. Applause swelled. Lights dimmed. I stepped into the spotlight. The audience stretched out before me, hundreds of faces, eyes lifted, waiting. And then, commotion. A wave of murmurs and shifting bodies rolled through the crowd. From the far back, 3 figures pushed past security, arguing, waving their arms. I recognized them immediately. Dad. Mom. Derek. Again. It was as if humiliation had become their last desperate form of control. Dad's voice rang out, sharp and unapologetic. "Everyone here needs to hear the truth. My daughter is lying. She's twisted the facts for attention." Gasps echoed across the auditorium. People turned in their seats. Mom stepped forward, dramatically wiping at tears. "We gave her everything. We sacrificed so much, and this is how she thanks us, by dragging her own family through the mud." And then Derek, his voice dripping with venom. "She's not a hero. She's a fraud with a victim complex." He held up his phone, live streaming the scene, just like last time. It should have shattered me. But it didn't. Because I wasn't the same girl anymore. I turned calmly to the projection screen behind me and tapped the remote. Slide 1. My bank records. Withdrawals I never made. Slide 2. My credit report showing cards I never applied for. Slide 3. Screenshots, texts, emails. Derek's Instagram posts from Vegas, dated the same days he claimed he couldn't afford rent. Slide 4. The voicemail from Mom. Marcie, you know how this works. You're the responsible one. Just fix it. And then, silence. Their words evaporated under the weight of evidence. I turned back to the crowd, my voice steady. For years, I believed that silence was love. That saying nothing meant protecting the people I cared about. But I learned something brutal and life-changing. Silence only protects the abuser, not the abused. You could hear a pin drop. I never asked for sympathy. I asked for acknowledgement. And when I stopped begging for it, I reclaimed my life. The applause didn't start slowly this time. It came in a wave, unrelenting, thunderous. People stood. Security rushed to escort my parents and brother out, but they didn't resist. They didn't scream. They were already defeated by the truth. Then, another twist. 2 uniformed police officers appeared from the wings of the stage. The taller one spoke with a clear, commanding tone. Robert Holloway. Patricia Holloway. Derek Holloway. You are under arrest for identity theft, financial fraud, and domestic economic abuse. The entire auditorium froze. Click, click, click. The cuffs were loud, deliberate, and final. My family was escorted out not just from the venue, but from the last remnants of power they held over me. I took a breath. It tasted like freedom. The rest of my speech flowed like a tide that had been held back for years. I spoke of rebuilding, of reclaiming, of surviving betrayal that doesn't leave bruises but bleeds you dry in ways that no one sees. And when I finished, the standing ovation wasn't just applause, it was recognition. 1,000 people saw me. Really saw me. Backstage, as the buzz of the crowd hummed on, I checked my phone. Dozens of messages. Dozens more voicemails. Reporters. Advocates. Survivors. People who had watched the live broadcast and finally saw their own stories reflected back at them. But one message stood out. Marcie, I watched the whole thing from my dorm. I cried. I'm not broken. I'm not crazy. I'm just like you. Thank you, Sophie. I smiled. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rescue. A few days later, I sat with Elaine from Highland Press, reviewing the final manuscript edits for my book. She looked at me across the table and said, "You've started something bigger than a movement. You've opened a floodgate." I nodded. Let it flood. The official book launch for Stepping Out of the Family Shadow was scheduled for the spring. But before that, something even more important was happening. The Phoenix Scholarship had grown fast. Too fast, almost. Within 6 months, we had helped over 20 individuals freeze fraudulent debts, press charges, and begin therapy or financial counseling. But to me, the true milestone wasn't in the numbers. It was dinner. A simple dinner. One long table, mismatched chairs, homemade food. The first ever Phoenix family dinner. No manipulation. No guilt trips. Just stories. Just safety. Megan made lasagna. Celeste brought wine. Rebecca told horrible jokes that made everyone groan and laugh anyway. I looked around and felt something I hadn't felt since childhood. Belonging. Not out of duty. Not out of blood. But out of choice. And then, Sophie stood up. She held a small envelope and smiled nervously. I just wanted to say, I froze my credit last month. And I start my first internship next week. Applause exploded. Not forced. Not obligatory. But pure, proud, and earned. After everyone left, I stayed behind to clean. Rebecca walked up behind me, drying a wine glass. You built something real, Marcie. I nodded. I didn't do it alone. She smiled. But you were the first one who stood. As the night air cooled the windows of my apartment, I looked at a new email that had just arrived. Subject line: University of Oregon. Guest lecture invitation. They wanted me to speak on rebuilding after family financial ruin. I smiled and replied with one word. Yes, because I wasn't done yet. The flight to Eugene was short, but the weight of it all made it feel like crossing an ocean. I was heading to the University of Oregon not as a student, not as someone begging for validation, but as a guest lecturer. A professor, in a sense, even if just for one day. The kind of opportunity that once felt galaxies away when I was eating vending machine sandwiches in the basement of the San Diego Library. Now, I was being flown out, expenses paid, to teach students how to protect themselves from the very thing that nearly broke me. As I walked across the campus, crisp leaves curling at my feet, I passed by buildings filled with people just beginning their journeys. I wondered how many of them had already given away too much for people who didn't deserve it. How many were silently co-signing debt out of guilt? How many were, like I once was, too afraid to call financial abuse by its name because the abuser shared their last name? The lecture hall was full, packed to the edges, with some students sitting cross-legged on the floor or standing in the back. I stood at the podium and introduced myself. My name is Marcie Holloway. I used to think that being a good daughter meant saying yes to everything, to everyone. Until the day I realized yes was killing me. The room went silent. I walked them through my story, how I worked through college with no safety net, how I was skipped over at graduations, how my name was used to open fraudulent credit accounts, how I was always the responsible one expected to clean up the mess. Then I showed them what happened when I stopped. When I froze the accounts, when I walked away, when I sued my own family. Some students gasped. A few teared up. Then I posed the question that always lands like thunder. How many of you have ever felt guilty for saying no to your family? Nearly every hand went up. That's when I knew the lecture wasn't just a lecture. It was a reckoning. Afterward, a line of students formed to speak with me. Some just wanted to say thank you. Others came with stories. One girl had been forced to take out student loans for her older brother's business. A boy had unknowingly had his mother open a credit card in his name at age 17. One woman whispered that she hadn't dared report her father's fraud because her church said family was sacred. I stayed for every story, because I had once needed someone to do the same for me. The next morning, I received an unexpected email from Celeste. You might want to check the news. I opened the link. High-profile financial abuse case leads to proposed legislation in California. My case. My lawsuit. It had sparked momentum. A young state assembly member had introduced the Holloway Act, a bill aiming to create stronger protections against family-based financial fraud, including education programs in high schools and legal aid support for victims. I stared at the screen, stunned. My name, attached to something that could save others. I didn't even cry. I just felt full. Alive. Real. And yet, the story wasn't done with me. That same evening, I received another message, this time from Elaine at Highland Press. Marcie, it's official. Your book's 3rd edition is in motion. And we've had an inquiry from Netflix. They're interested in adapting it. I choked on my tea. A movie? A movie? I hadn't even dreamed that far, but now the impossible felt within reach. Still, even as the accolades grew, the core of everything I'd built remained simple, telling the truth. And the truth was, justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it's quiet, steady, legal, relentless. The court proceedings against my family had continued in the background. Depositions, evidence, witness statements. Amelia and her legal team handled everything with surgical precision. Then one morning, I got the call. They've accepted the plea deal, Amelia said. Your parents and brother have agreed to financial restitution and will serve probation. Derek, however, due to the scope of his fraud, will serve 18 months in a minimum security facility. I was quiet for a moment, not out of sadness, but closure. They'll be barred from contacting you, she continued. And the restitution will be paid out over the next 5 years. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. It was about accountability. It was about having someone finally say, what they did to you was wrong. Later that week, I stood on my balcony in Portland as the sun dipped below the skyline. The city buzzed around me, but I stood still, breathing in the cool evening air. I picked up my phone and opened my notes app. A new manuscript title stared back at me. Blood is not a contract. A follow-up to Stepping Out of the Family Shadow, focused entirely on legal and emotional strategies to escape toxic family dynamics. Because as long as people were still suffering, I would keep writing, keep speaking, keep standing. And then, just when I thought I'd seen every ripple from my story, Sophie called. Her voice trembled, but she wasn't crying. Marcie, I just got accepted into UC Berkeley. Full ride. And I want you to know, I named my application essay after your talk. I laughed, tears stinging the corners of my eyes. What was it called? She hesitated, then said, Silence only protects the abuser. The same words I had spoken on stage when the world watched. I sat down overwhelmed. Not with grief, not with anger, but with gratitude. Sophie was proof that the cycle had been broken. And that was worth everything. 6 months after that phone call with Sophie, I stood in the green room of a TV studio in New York City. A makeup artist flitted around me, dabbing concealer beneath my eyes, while a producer ran through cue cards. Across the hall, a huge screen bore my face beside the headline, Marcie Holloway, from family betrayal to national advocate. It still didn't feel real. I was there to talk about my book's 3rd edition, the newly proposed Holloway Act, and the skyrocketing growth of the Phoenix Scholarship. But deep down, I knew what this interview really was: a symbol. Proof that someone like me, who had once been invisible at her own graduation, now had a voice loud enough to echo across the country. The interview went smoothly, polished, powerful. The host called me brave. The audience applauded. A few even cried. Afterward, a camera assistant whispered to me, My sister's been through the same thing. She thought no one would believe her. I'm sending her your story tonight. It never stopped hitting me how widespread this was, how normal abuse could look when it wore the mask of family. By the time I returned to Portland, I had 20 new messages waiting: publishers, survivors, therapists, even high school teachers asking if they could use my TEDx talk in class. But one message stopped me cold. It was from a woman named Charlotte Hale, a name I hadn't heard in over a decade. She'd been my high school guidance counselor. Her message was short. I saw your story, Marcie. I remember how quiet you were back then. I should have asked more questions. I'm proud of you. I stared at that message longer than I should have. Because back then, when I skipped prom to work a double shift, when I avoided eye contact during parent-teacher meetings because no one ever showed up for mine, I had wanted so badly for someone to notice, to ask, to care. Now they did. Still, I wasn't chasing recognition anymore. I was chasing impact. The Phoenix Scholarship became a full-fledged nonprofit by the end of the year. We hired legal advisors, therapists, and financial coaches. We partnered with 3 universities and launched an emergency fund for students escaping family abuse. At our annual donor gala, we honored the first 10 recipients of the Phoenix Fellowship, young people rebuilding their lives, each with stories that mirrored pieces of my own. Sophie gave the keynote. She stood tall in a sleek black dress, her voice clear and unwavering. There was a time when I thought saying no meant I was broken, that I wasn't a good daughter. But then I found Marcie's story. And I realized that protecting yourself is love. It's love for your future, for your peace, for your real family, the one you choose. The room went silent. Then thunderous applause. I sat at the edge of the stage afterward, watching as people surrounded Sophie, encouraging her, hugging her, thanking her. That night, I didn't feel like the main character anymore. I felt like a match that had lit a dozen other flames, and together, we were setting the world on fire. Months passed. My book became a curriculum tool in 5 college courses. The Netflix deal moved forward. A screenwriter flew out to interview me personally. Her eyes welled up as I told her about the night. I realized my family didn't see me as a daughter, but as an account number. This story's going to save people, she whispered. You know that, right? I nodded. That's the goal. But I still had one more chapter to write. One day, I returned home to find an envelope on my doorstep. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting. It was from my mother. Inside was a letter. Pages long. Messy. Rambling. She blamed the lawyers. The banks. Said she'd been desperate. Said she didn't know what she was doing. Then the final line. Please forgive us. We're still your family. I folded the letter neatly, set it on the table, and walked away. Not out of hate, but because closure doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it's knowing you have the right to walk away. That weekend, at our quarterly Phoenix dinner, we welcomed 5 new members, each with their own heavy stories. One of them, a trans man named Caleb, had been forced to pay his parents' mortgage since he was 17. He said finding our group made him feel like he had a family for the first time. We toasted with sparkling cider. Megan made baked ziti. Celeste told her famously bad jokes. I looked around the table at these brave, beautiful souls and felt something deep settle in my chest. Peace. Because this wasn't just survival anymore. This was belonging. And I had earned it. The next morning, I wrote in my journal, a habit I had restarted after so many years of bottling up emotions. You are not a bank account. You are not a fixer. You are not selfish for saying no. You are free. Later, while preparing for another university workshop, I found myself flipping through old photos, ones I had buried in a folder I hadn't touched in years. There it was again. The graduation photo with the empty chairs. I stared at it a long time. Then I deleted it. Not because I was erasing my past, but because I didn't need the proof anymore. My existence, my life, was the proof. And that life had become bigger, brighter, bolder than anything I could have imagined when I sat alone on that stone bench. So now, when people ask who I am, I don't start with the pain. I say, my name is Marcie Holloway. I'm 27 years old. I was once betrayed by the people I loved most. But now I help others break free from the same chains. I am not what happened to me. I am what I chose to become. Sometimes, family isn't the people you're born to. It's the people you choose, the ones who respect your boundaries, your worth, and your peace. Marcie's journey is a powerful reminder that protecting yourself is not betrayal, it's survival. And that surviving is just the beginning. If you've ever been taken advantage of by the people who should have protected you, know this. You are not alone. And you are allowed to say no. Subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more powerful stories like Marcie's. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story hit close to home, share it with someone who needs to hear it.